Yesterday, the Ukrainian army successfully carried out its longest-range mass attack of the war so far. But this time, the main players weren't tanks, fighter jets, or even the heroic armed forces. It was something else entirely that's reshaping military history: drones. According to Ukrainian sources, they managed to send 117 drones into Russia without triggering the slightest suspicion from Putin's intelligence services. This operation had been planned and developed for over a year and a half. When the moment came, all the drones activated at once and attacked, reportedly striking more than 40 Russian warplanes across at least 4 different bases and causing an estimated $7 billion in damage. There's a lot to discuss here. It's not every day you see logistics so advanced that they leave Russian intelligence in the dust. This operation could easily be compared to Israel's explosive walkie-talkie sabotage in Hezbollah's supply chain. What's clear is that drones are redefining the battlefield. They're already being used to deliver supplies, deploy mines, monitor key hotspots on the front line, directly attack enemy infrastructure. And that's just the beginning. For context, drones are now responsible for 80% of Russian frontline casualties, and sadly also account for 70% of civilian casualties on the Ukrainian side. What's clear is that drones are redefining the battlefield. They're already being used to deliver supplies, deploy mines, monitor key hotspots on the front line, directly attack enemy infrastructure. And that's just the beginning. For context, drones are now responsible for 80% of Russian frontline casualties, and sadly also account for 70% of civilian casualties on the Ukrainian side. Think about that. Ukraine just severely damaged Russia's Air Force 4 around the same cost as a used BMW 7 Series. Yes, this doesn't account for the cost of pilot training or logistics, but even so, the conclusion stands. A basic FPV drone, which requires a human pilot watching through a camera feed, costs about $400. Ukraine is fully committed to making these drones even cheaper and deadlier. It's clear, drones are here to stay. That means mastering drone technology, and equally important, developing defenses against it, could be the key to controlling the battlefield. So the next time you see one of those fancy drone light shows replacing fireworks, don't assume you're watching something purely artistic. You're witnessing a modern military display. For perspective, the Guinness World Record for the largest drone show belongs to Chinese company Demoda, which flew 10,518 drones in Vietnam. Europe's biggest drone show? It's just 1,495. Less than 15% of that. While Europe is now prioritizing defense and aiming for 2% of GDP spending, the continent still lags behind in key areas. Drones expose 2 of Europe's major weaknesses in military production: the inability to manufacture at scale and the lack of major homegrown tech firms. So what is Europe doing to lead in the next generation of warfare? And what can it learn from Ukraine? Drone warfare might feel futuristic, but it was predicted long ago. In 1895, Nikola Tesla piloted the world's first drone, a radio-controlled boat. Newspapers of the time speculated that warships and guns might soon become obsolete. Tesla even spoke of these drones the way we now speak of nuclear weapons. War will cease to be possible when even the weakest nation can equip itself with a weapon that makes its coasts and ports impervious to assault, even by the united fleets of the world. But modern drones, as we know them, wouldn't become reality for another century, thanks in large part to a European company, France's Parrot. In 2010, they launched the first drone controllable via smartphone. It was hard to fly, and the video quality was poor, but it inspired the models that followed. Everything changed in 2013 when Chinese company DJI released the Phantom 1. It was stable enough for professional photography and cost under $500. DJI's success propelled China into the lead as the world's top drone manufacturer, surpassing both Parrot and several American competitors that had entered the market just a few years earlier. One thing is to invent something, another is to mass produce it. China has played a minor role in drone R&D, but it controls over 80% of the global market for drone production and assembly. Even major US companies depend on Chinese components. For example, Skydio, the largest drone manufacturer in the United States, has sold over 1,000 drones to Ukraine, mainly for reconnaissance. But when China imposed sanctions, it cut off key components, and Skydio had to halt production for several months. The message is clear. As long as Europe depends on China for drone parts, it will remain vulnerable to geopolitical threats, not just from Xi Jinping, but from Putin as well. One critical component China controls is batteries. Companies like CATL dominate 30 to 40% of the global battery market, and over 70% for specific materials. Lighter and more powerful batteries enable drones to fly farther, safer, and with greater maneuverability. Europe tried to fight back with a major investment in Swedish battery startup Northvolt, backed by politicians and car makers like BMW and Volkswagen. But in March, the company declared bankruptcy. Northvolt had made grand promises, but failed to deliver. It aimed to manufacture not just EV batteries, but even batteries for electric aircraft. But battery manufacturing is trial and error, and their products had numerous flaws, which is normal. Problem was they overpromised and ran out of money before learning from their mistakes. The moral: you can't solve problems just by throwing money at them. DJI started small and took years to scale. Once it proved successful, the Chinese government stepped in to support it. Europe struggles not with innovation, but with helping successful startups grow. This isn't just a drone issue, it reflects a broader economic challenge across the continent. And there's another big issue. Drones are useless without intelligence and communication infrastructure. In practice, that means satellites. And today, both Ukraine and Europe are completely dependent on Starlink, Elon Musk's satellite internet system. This is arguably safer than relying on Russian gas or Chinese chips, but still far from ideal. Neither Musk nor the US political system is seen as fully reliable. Problem is, no one else can compete. Starlink uses SpaceX to launch satellites faster than anyone else. In fact, SpaceX is responsible for 75% of all current space launches. Europe has tried to create alternatives. French company Eutelsat has 2,000 terminals operating in Ukraine. Airbus, Leonardo, and Thales have joined forces to create their own satellite network. And the EU is launching NINES, a 10.5 billion euros project to put 290 satellites into orbit. These are all smaller-scale efforts, but they aim to meet Europe's needs. Meanwhile, Ukraine is set to produce over 4 million drones in 2025. That's an extraordinary number. This war has shown that a country can make up for decades of technological lag in just a few years. If done right, Europe, however, is still underinvesting. Most of its limited spending goes toward green transport and environmental tech, not defense. Funding also dropped significantly from 2023 to 2024. Looking at EU-funded drone projects, only 6 received more than 10 million euros, and none focused directly on defense. That wouldn't be such a problem if the overall funding were higher, but it's not. In a recent move, the EU allocated 910 million euros from the European Defence Fund, but only 45 million euros was earmarked for battlefield disruptive tech. That's less than the annual salary of a few soccer stars, and it's split among at least 9 projects. One promising project is a joint effort with Ukraine to develop a new generation of AI-piloted drones. But with such limited funding, how far can they really go? The issue in Europe isn't just bad spending, it's unfocused spending. Ukrainian companies, in contrast, operate in an ultra-competitive war economy where innovation is constant. The Zelensky administration understands that Ukraine's survival depends on market-driven competition, where the best drone makers outshine the rest. They've even introduced a points-based system to reward drone manufacturers based on battlefield performance. It's essentially money, but only usable within the defense sector. So just when Europe finally starts working with top-tier Ukrainian drone companies, it tightens its wallet. It's baffling. Thankfully, some EU nations are taking drones seriously. Denmark, for example. Despite a population of just 6 million, Denmark has around 600 drone-related companies, employing over 18,500 people and generating $2 billion in exports. Companies like Nordic Wing make high-end drones for intelligence missions that have performed well in Ukraine. These models cost between $70,000 and $200,000. It's much more than typical FPVs, but are still highly competitive with alternatives from other countries, including China. Companies like Nordic Wing make high-end drones for intelligence missions, that have performed well in Ukraine. These models cost between $70,000 and $200,000. It's much more than typical FPVs, but are still highly competitive with alternatives from other countries, including China. Denmark's success stems partly from strong synergy between drones and other sectors, like wind turbine maintenance. The country also has one of the world's most flexible labor markets, crucial for an unpredictable, fast-moving industry like tech. Another key advantage. Denmark allows drones to fly and collect real-world data to improve future models. Yes, drones fly in every country, but most of Europe has highly restrictive regulations. In 2024, new rules rendered nearly all drones obsolete, unless they were top of the line, and banned flights near populated areas. Worse yet, these regulations create major barriers for small companies without the legal resources to navigate the red tape. The EU is aware of this and is working on a program called SPACE, aimed at harmonizing drone regulations across member states. But as usual, it's moving slowly and won't be fully in effect until 2030. One thing is certain: drones are going to reshape warfare. Neither Europe nor the US can afford to be left behind. Ukraine is showing the way, and the West will have a much easier time following if it collaborates with Ukrainian companies. Helping Ukraine win this war is no longer just an act of solidarity. It's a smart investment in Europe's future, a very necessary one.